Welcome back to Code Red After Dark, I guess. We're filming this one from high above Jersey City on the 22nd floor in our Trend Micro Code Red podcast studios. I'm joined again for episode 2 here by Brady. Say hello.
Hey, everybody.
And Dan.
Good evening.
Thanks for mixing that up for us. We appreciate that. Anyway, I normally wanted the bowl of security topics, but we actually touched on something that was a security topic in episode 1, and I wanted to explore that a little bit more, so I went ahead and pre-picked it for us. So the no surprise, it's on why connected ecosystems matter, right? And I just wanted to walk through a little bit of security history, I guess, or IT security history, and then we can dig into what we have in the present. So, yeah, perfect. So way back when I started doing this, well before you gentlemen were born, one of the, security, even today, I get it less and less every year that I'm here, but a lot of times people still think of it as this big, heavy endpoint agent that,
just takes, resource intensive, slow.
Takes up a big amount of space on the machine, right? That's what a lot of folks would say when I started my career.
Yeah, the pattern file, right? So that was traditional security, which is, hey, here's a list of all the known viruses that we have in the world. Check and see if you got them. Mm-hmm. Okay? I mean, when Trend started, we were scanning for, do you guys know? Four viruses is what we were looking for.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah, so we've been around for quite a bit of time, 30, coming up on 35 years.
I think that was the Virus Buster application too, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Funny name era.
But anyway, it's always been thought of as this big thing in the way. And what happens when security is in the way?
People bypass it.
Yeah.
People find workarounds. They'll do whatever they got to do to, not have to deal with that on a regular basis. Something cumbersome and irritating on a regular basis.
Right.
Business pushes them out of the way.
What else do you end up with for, especially you end users? My favorite is Post-it notes on laptops, right?
Oh, yeah.
You have such a password rotation policy that this is what you end up with. Neither here nor there.
Help desk days, definitely. We would constantly see laptops with Post-it notes on them because of the retention policy or the change management policy on the passwords.
Yeah, and today, no matter how many times you tell some people, listen, Trend especially, and the industry in general, let's be fair, has moved past this, or at least most of the vendors have.
A friend of mine at a major SaaS company has a 25-character minimum password. And where do you think he's keeping his passwords?
Yeah, that's insane. But for our scanning agent alone, right? What I consider the base level of security, which is, if you're relying on your anti-malware scanning at the end of the day, things have gone wrong. We've moved on to real-time scanning, machine learning, all kinds of advanced things. So that those days of set my machine to scan and go to lunch are pretty much past us. But Dan, you were a sysadmin, right?
Yeah.
So back in these halcyon days of securing in large environments, how did you cope with some of this?
Yeah, especially like Brady said, in an early stage startup, you as an operations person are the security responsible person. You're responsible for making sure all the laptop, desktop images have everything that they need. And with that came, surprisingly enough, unbeknownst to us, right? The responsibility of doing EDR. So when, for example, somebody were to go in, setting up the Gmail or O365 in those early days with cloud was just the first step, right? And when we did that, that's perfect. All right, this person's ready to roll out and they're ready to do their job for the next however many years that they're with the company. But unbeknownst to us, spam emails would come in, phishing emails would come in, and we would kind of trust whatever was there, to handle it.
You said you'd get spam emails, phishing emails, and now you were a smaller startup, right? So one of the things that I see is we have bubblegum and shoestring budgets in security, right? We always have to do more with less. And I say we, it's the proverbial we, right? Our customers always have to do more with less. And while they're handling this, their environments are growing and growing and growing. And, in a traditional model, you have a threat come in on email. The email team traditionally would handle that because they also handled security as they got spam and phishing and malware scanning. Maybe the malware would land on the endpoint from a bad email, right? And then you would scan there, and that team would see an alert. But a lot of times, one hand didn't necessarily know what the other hand was doing, right? So that becomes it's less of a problem for smaller organizations. And I mean small, where you can have one security human being sitting even at the other side of a SIM going, here's a threat, here's a threat, here's a threat, let me go hunt these down. But I'm curious, how did you manage it in the days before?
When it was unbeknownst to you that you were the security professional, right?
Right, yeah.
No, we would basically have a situation in place where we would notice that, email came in from spam, for example. And we'd see that email came in and a user clicked on it. And what we do from there is basically just isolate that from the network, typically by hand, since we were mostly office-based folks. So we'd go out to the user's desk, unplug their workstation, take that workstation into our lab, and then run some kind of freeware malware on it, right?
So what you're saying is they would get a bad email, they would click it, and
I would show up at their desk.
Physically, like you did something wrong, here you go.
Yeah. You'd give them a little notification on the email that you were stopping by, and they'd need to take a long lunch or
Please
something
be
of that
available.
nature. Exactly.
That's insane. That's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And then you can't manage that at scale at all.
No. Especially when even a small business grows to a Canada office or the Europe, then you need somebody in each of those offices. In 2022 and 2023, that's completely unimaginable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would like to go to Europe to isolate somebody's laptop, but it's not a tenable solution, right?
No.
So, okay. So obviously, I'm sure any of you watching, a lot of you have had these very similar experiences, right?
Yeah. How much spam email do you get now versus that era, right? It's insane.
I click on them for fun. So, in fact, if I knew you came to my desk, every time I clicked on a spam address, I would just be doing that all day long.
Start doing it more, yeah.
But what's funny is something else you said about that. While they were scrimping and saving on the human cost of security, meaning your hours to fix these issues, what they were losing was the cost or the productivity from that employee who no longer had, a laptop, right? So I imagine like if it was a sales individual who's out there not only trying to push your company's software or what have you, but try to make their commission. I imagine those were some awkward conversations.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because they were mostly folks that didn't have even in those eras, everybody was responsible for security. Everybody had that understanding, but there was no 2 times a year, 4 times a year trainings for security awareness and things of that nature, right? So like I mentioned, unbeknownst to us, we're suddenly the security professionals. Luckily, we're living now in an era where those folks can have access to information, have access to education, have access to toolings like what we're going to talk about, where it can take a lot of the burden off of them.
Yeah. So, and I know Mark. Mark is our producer, is frantically waving at us that he's almost out of space. But I just told him to buy a new hard drive, but that didn't work. But bringing this into modern security, right? This is when we talk about connected threat defense or connected ecosystems, shared data lakes and EDR and XDR and Vision One and lots of all these other terms. What we really mean at the end of the day is you have hopefully native security tools and products all contributing for their various environments like email, endpoint, server. They're all contributing what we call telemetry or data into a shared data lake, which can then be analyzed, cross-correlated, and hopefully have some intelligence applied to it to help you, the human, out, right? So actually, we're gonna use our fancy TV up here. We're going to go right into our console. Yeah, exciting, isn't it? So what you're looking at there at home is our Vision 1 console. This is actually, I've opened up a workbench. Workbenches are our automated investigations. But this speaks a little bit to one of the examples that Dan just gave in terms of an email having come in and then having some actions which may not have been so great for the organization. So you'll see here that there was a suspicious email which was sent to our user, Sam. It was actually sent to a couple of other different folks in the organization. Either that exact email was forwarded or it was enough of a match that the system was able to correlate it. So here we have an email product located in one of the cloud app email providers. Trend has determined that this email is suspicious, and we'll see why in a moment. We see the users that this went to, and then we actually see that maybe nothing happened with one of these users, but another thing did happen with a user who was logged in. And what ended up occurring was there was a suspicious link here. This is actually what helped trigger it. There's a spear phishing link. So this was something that was either tested by Trend or known to us to be malicious. And that link, when the user clicked it, which we can see happened over here, spawned a command to be executed on the machine, caused Internet Explorer to be opened, and from there, even worse things can happen, right? So bottom line, this is your example in the future, right? Now, so you say, okay, so if this was you, 10 years ago, or if this was you today in that same organization, from this console, you could take a number of individual actions which you probably never had access to before. So the first is we can search across the entire environment for all of our email inboxes and say, hey, who else has this email? I can get an exhaustive list. And then I can immediately quarantine or delete that message right out of the cloud email inboxes. And then this way, nobody else has the opportunity to click it if they haven't done so already. To that end, I can look at this link and I can say, hey, I'd like to search and see who else has clicked this link. Maybe it came in maybe this is part of a targeted attack. It could be more than just email. You could be Mr. Robot style sprinkling thumb drives out, in the parking lot, right?
Yeah.
But again, at the same time, I can also add it to the block list, right? And I can say, hey, let's work with an OpenIOC firewall. Please don't ever allow any user to even click this. So now even I'm extending past endpoints that maybe we have coverage on. Maybe we've got shadow IT. Maybe users have brought their own devices and connected to the network. They're still a threat, right?
Yeah. Not to interrupt, but whenever I see this product, I'm always blown away by the capabilities of this Vision 1. It's just head and shoulders above. I think from the perspective of risk in particular, it's just head and shoulders above. I think anything else that's available right now.
Yeah, I was never thinking in the days that Casey mentioned here about risk, and more importantly, who else got emails, right? I just saw the detection and responded to it in person. So this is obviously a huge step up from ever needing to go and visit someone physically.
You can another thing worth mentioning is not only can you quarantine it, you can also send it for a sandbox analysis.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
You can have us do the dirty work for you.
Right. Trend has cloud sandboxing. So more than just URLs, files as well. So if there's a file that maybe is suspicious, maybe you found it in the course of investigation, it wasn't even triggered on, we can send it off to the Trend Cloud sandboxing, completely safe within your, outside of your environment, execute that file, generate a report, and then take action.
And there's even the rare case when an organization is in a position where they want to know what it is that you're trying to send them, or they want to know who it is that's trying to catch them.
Right.
And that's a really good tool for that.
Yeah, same idea here as well is when there's a sender, we can take action and block the sender of these emails at the same time, right? So that's a little less effective because clearly we're going to rotate through. So Dan, I wanted to show you the U.
Yeah.
Right? So right here, remember Dan mentioned he goes to offices and physically confiscates laptops and scans them. Well, here's this endpoint that was involved in this. Right from the console, I can isolate the endpoint, and then I can also do remote shell and custom scripting to perform my investigative and recovery actions on this endpoint, right? So that was what you were physically doing.
So this is great. I know, 10 years ago, me would love to have a tool like this. But at scale, globally, how is this going to work?
Well, okay. So I think what Dan is cheekily getting at is, yes, this has centralized a lot of those manual functions he used to do in the past, right? But we still are having a human sitting here taking these actions. So a couple of different things. Number one is all of those disparate alerts from all of those individual products have been cross-correlated and connected together in what you see in our workbench here, right? So that's number one. So we're moving a lot of the burden to you of, is this a real threat? Is it not a real threat? Okay, so we're now telling you, hey, you really need to pay attention to this part. Secondly, whether you want to still have a manual touch or not, there's things called security playbooks that are built in with this, where the system itself can take automated actions that you've pre-approved in the past, such as an example such as this is if you have a user downloading some malware, clicking a suspicious link, the system can actually measure the severity of that and then proactively isolate that user's endpoint. It can send files for sandboxing. It can even open up tickets in your ticketing system and say, hey, hands and feet team, you're going to have to go ahead and take a look at this. This endpoint's been isolated. This file's been sandboxed, what have you. And on top of all that, as your organization really scales, you can you can engage with Trend on our managed XDR solution, which is effectively a Trend micro SOC staffed with what I call unicorn security experts, who are folks who understand email, endpoint, server, networking protocols, cloud services, and solutions. So when they look at these workbenches, they can conduct investigations on your organization's behalf and deliver a report to you that just says, hey, this is what happened. Here's what you need to do to fix it. Here are the iterative steps.
Yeah, so just out of curiosity, where do you think this category ends up going in 3 to 5 years? Because do you think you ever even open up the workload security console ever again? Or do you think that I think there's a lot of, it seems like this thing has new capabilities every other week.
Well, I'll tell you, for those at home, workload security is the
Right,
agent that is doing the blocking and tackling protection for your anywhere you install an agent, so Windows, Linux, etc. So, what a forward-looking question that is. First things first, the Trend Cloud One platform does a lot of things, some of which report to Vision 1, the rest of which are coming online into Vision 1, right? So immediate future is more and more sensors, because the more information we can see and the more telemetry we can get, the more we can correlate and the more actions we can take and perform for you, by you, you can take it there, right? And then moving past that, I mean, I gotta tell you, if I could have predicted the EDR, XDR market 10 years ago, right? It might be Casey Micro, not Trend Micro, right?
And I wouldn't have to be headhunting folks for their laptops, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. But really, the information is key, and one of the places that Trend has always been uniquely positioned is that we did sensors or agents, right, really well. We already had all of the pieces. We had an email product, a network product, endpoint protection products. We had all of these things already generating this data. It was just a matter of applying a data lake and collecting that telemetry and figuring it out, right? Which, frankly, is the opposite of a lot of, you mentioned those smaller startups in our last episode, but it's the opposite of that. We've done the blocking and tackling for 35 years, and we've done it really well, right?
Yep.
And so now all we're doing is taking that data and showing you how to block and tackle better. So it's going to be a lot more of this. There's a lot more consolidation in terms of all of these different services and connected, cloud offerings, right? They all generate a lot of data. So a lot of that data is going to start hitting the console, and you'll be able to do a lot more different things, a lot more powerful things. And what a curveball question from so, any last words, gentlemen?
No, this is always a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I still think visiting folks to confiscate their devices is really it's a great way to build relationships at work.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll put an offer out there to anybody. And again, if we have comments, what are we supposed to do? Thumbs up?
Like,
Yeah.
subscribe, and then comment.
Whatever. If you comment that you want Dan to come confiscate your laptop,
I will find my way to
Yes,
wherever
we
you
will.
happen to be.
Please be in a warm weather destination, as we are in the Northeast right now, and it's getting colder. So.
Yeah.
Well, for Trend Micro, I'm Casey,
I'm Dan.
I am Brady.
and this has been Code Red. Thanks for joining us.